Now, most people would be surprised that guys in prison would care, first of all, about crimes against someone outside of prison or care about your hygiene. But I've had Wes Watson on, who spent time in prison, but the clicks all happen based on race, and that's your security. And you then make sure that those people all have good paperwork, and if they don't, then they get rid of you, right? So, and in hygiene's super important, right? All these protocols, it goes militant in there.
It goes militant, and from having my own true crime podcast, Brian, and interviewing people who've been in prison all over the world and getting the complete backstories, what I've learned is a lot of people who get involved in crime and addiction do so because something traumatic has happened to them in their childhood. And a lot of those guys have been abused as kids, sexual abuse, physical abuse. And I can understand if a paedophile ends up in an environment where people are hardcore criminals who've been abused as kids, they're going to get lynched. They're going to take that rage out on that person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I saw it very quickly. A guy came in who, they asked me about him. I said, I don't know anything about this guy, but they suspected he was a chum, obviously. So they got him in the shower and they beat the shit out of him in the shower and leave him whimpering in a pool of blood. But then the big guy says that wasn't enough. And they're like, oh, we smashed him good, dog. Didn't smash him good enough, the big guy says. So he goes in and he's just like he's trying to crack this guy's head open like it's a coconut, just crack, 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 until this guy's unconscious and looks dead. And the guard comes. Every 20, 30 minutes, they do a security walk. Lock down, everybody lock down. So I go back to my cell, put my face to the window, and he's getting carried on a stretcher, and there's not just blood coming out of his head, there's yellow stuff coming out of his head, like brain stuff coming out of his head. And you just don't know whether these guys are dead or alive until it pops up on the news. Yeah.
There's a lot of violence going on there.
Every day someone's getting smashed because you got all these racial gangs. They're all high on crystal meth, getting paranoid about each other and heroin. And
Let's talk about the drugs. You can get drugs in prison. Most people don't even understand that.
there's more drugs in prison than anywhere on the face of the earth. So, in the long run, the people who can keep the drug businesses going are the large criminal enterprises like the cartels and prison gangs, like the Mexican Mafia and the Aryan Brotherhood. Because in the short run, all the smaller people get wiped out. They don't have the resources to keep it going. So if you're the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang and you've got people in a closed environment, 90% of whom have got addiction issues, it's your ideal market to sell drugs to all day long. The illegal drug market gets bigger every year because of the drug laws. And these gangs get more and more power through drug money. And that's how Aryan Brotherhood now has become a number one cause of murder throughout the entire country. It's a murder high business in and out, outside of prison. Italian mafia goes to those guys now because they're considered some of the most stone cold killers. It's all come out of the US prison system. So yeah, 90% were injecting heroin and crystal meth where I was housed. 2/3 had hepatitis C from sharing dirty needles.
Because that's the only way to get through that time, or they come in addicted and then it's such a depressing place.
All of the above. So we take people who are, I'd just like to say that I thought prisons lock them up and throw away the key before I got arrested. The paedophiles, rapists, serial killers. I had no idea that the media just puts that out there to keep the public misled and hating on prisoners. And then the media says on the other side, they've got PlayStations, they've got gourmet food, they've got luxuries at the taxpayers' expense, and that also keeps the public hating on prisoners. At the peak of the war on drugs, to fill the private prisons, which were getting $50,000 a year of taxpayers' money, they mass incarcerated low-level drug users, with the biggest category being potheads. Over 500,000 potheads, weed possessors, not dealers, weed possessors a year were getting fed into the US justice system. So I got in there and I saw the average arrest was a black kid or a Mexican kid with a bit of weed getting like a 2 to 5 year sentence. I saw that prison was the biggest houser of the mentally ill. More than half of my friends were soldiers. They'd come back from wars, traumatized. Government didn't give them any help at all. They got on street drugs to self-medicate for their trauma, PTSD, and they'd ended up in prison. So I learned that prison housed society's most vulnerable people. And I became a prison activist through that. And I'm not saying, you know, pedophiles, serial killers, rapists should have it easy through my activism. I'm saying those guys should be doing more time. Why are there people under 3 strikes laws? And people say that I'm making this up. I was in Holland at the Hemp Museum. It's on the wall over there. Under 3 strikes laws, there are people still doing life sentences in America for weed possession, which is 25 to life. And the political pedophiles, government is telling us they don't even have the resources to investigate them. It costs $50,000 a year to have someone in prison. 25 years, that's 1 point something million. That's where the money's gone. It's ridiculous. So that corporations and politicians can make tens of billions a year in private prison contracts.
All based on the war on drugs, quote unquote.
All based on the war on drugs. That's why I've written a series of books on the war on drugs to expose it.
And the Americans do that better than anyone else.
Well, the Americans are sick of it, the public. That's why weed is getting decriminalized on the state level. I mean, there are some states prior to this where if your teenage kids got pulled over in your car with weed, please keep the car under civil asset forfeiture laws. So it's got to such an extreme in America, there's been a backlash. People have voted for legalization to decriminalization at the state level. But US federal government has maintained weed as a Schedule I substance, more harmful than crystal meth and cocaine, with no medicinal value whatsoever, because that's where the corporations want it to be.
And you got to see the fallout of that in human lives in prison, and it's ugly and nasty.
If you arrest a kid for weed, and I'm a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, LEAP, and they say we're cops who are joined to arrest the bad guys. We were assigned to infiltrate student groups, get them high on weed, and then arrest them at the end of the month. What does that do to that kid? He's criminalized. He can't get a job. He goes to the jail where he gets recruited by the Aryan Brotherhood prison gang because he's so scared of the gang he thinks if he doesn't join he's going to get attacked or raped. Gets neo-Nazi tattoos. They give you swastikas and SS lightning bolts for beating people up and collecting debts for the gang. To be a full member of the AB, to get patched in, you have to murder someone for them. Completely indoctrinated into that world. That young person, he makes his criminal connections in prison. He gets this addiction to heroin and possibly hepatitis C. And by the time that kid gets out of prison, he's ruined. He's made a name for himself in the criminal community. So that's what he goes right back to. And as soon as he gets rearrested, guess what? $50,000 of taxpayers' money per year back to the prison. Corrections Corporation of America are boasting in their annual report to their shareholders, our profit growth is guaranteed because they keep coming back. They're not correcting people, they're breaking them.